Well, you could find porn to your point, on Twitter or X. You used to be able to find it on Tumblr, but they got rid of it. Yeah.
Yep. The Millennial Patreon.
Sign up today.
Welcome to Millennial, the home of our glorious 47th president, Donald J. Trump. I am Donald J. Trump, superfan number one, Andrew.
Wow, what a lead-in. I'm not gonna play along with that. I fucking hate Donald Trump, and I'm Laura.
Oh, great. And we're gonna be taken off the air.
Well, I mean, we're probably already on a watch list, so it's fine.
I was going to say, way to try and bring in new listeners, but I don't know if we want those.
That's what I'm trying to do, the YouTube audience. We can find some of those
rage listen.
Yeah.
That's still a number, but I just don't know if we're the show for them. Anyway, I'm Pam.
Hello. And we're actually recording and releasing this 24 hours later than we normally would. We were planning to record on Tuesday like we normally do, but as some of you may have heard, some winter storms were hitting the South. And Laura, you got affected by it?
Yeah, I did. So we had this polar vortex in the South. I know they also had one up in DC around Inauguration Day, which I'm sure we're going to touch on in a minute. But yeah, this one kind of caught Atlanta with its pants down. I'm not going to lie. I think what's the most embarrassing about it is that we just got snow 2 weeks ago, and we actually got more snow 2 weeks ago than we got in this particular event. It snowed for like maybe a little over an hour, but it created disaster on all of the local roads inside the city because no one salted them.
Oh.
So, first of all, during our last snow and ice event a couple weeks ago, I slipped in some ice and fractured my foot. So I already have that going on. I'm in a boot. It's fine. I'm fine. But I also had to get Canella to the vet yesterday for a dental cleaning. And it turned out she had a bad tooth that had to be extracted. So she had to get that done. And then I'm transporting her home yesterday afternoon around 3 p.m. when the snow starts. The snow starts and traffic just comes to a standstill everywhere, highways, local roads. There really were no good routes to get around. I, in retrospect, made the very dumb decision to try and cut corners by going down local roads to get home and ended up getting stuck on those local roads for 4 hours to go 5 miles back to my home. And so at first I texted all of y'all when the snow first started. I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? This is happening again. But then the closer we got to the show, I was like, I don't think I'm going to make it. And it was shocking to me because at 3 p.m. when this first started, I was like, surely this may take a couple hours to get through, but surely I will be home well before showtime. And then as it got closer, I was in denial. And I was like, okay, I might be cutting it close, but I think I'm still going to make it in time. And then it got to an hour before showtime, and I texted them, and I was like, guys, I'm really worried. I'm not going to make it for the show.
Laura, did you see the theory I raised about you on our social media yesterday when I informed our listeners we would not be recording last night?
Oh, did you tell everyone I died again?
No. We know you're a homebody. You're not out and about too often, certainly not driving before showtime. And I just found it very curious that you happen to be driving some apparently long distance the day after the inauguration. And I was wondering if maybe you had a ticket to the Capital One Arena on Monday night to watch Trump sign a bunch of EOs.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
The rumors are false.
Yeah. I mean, at first I thought you were going somewhere darker with that. And I was going to be like, Andrew, don't tell anyone.
You being a Trump fan would be pretty dark.
Yeah.
What?
No. Never.
Were you thinking I was going to suggest you were insurrecting?
Yeah. Like, Biden is like totally normalizing this. It's like he's like, let me pardon my entire family preemptively, but then I'm gonna go have tea with this guy and like sit politely and clap at his inauguration. So it's like, yeah, he's not gonna step up. Someone has to do it.
And speaking of normalizing, Trump pardoned or commuted the sentences of every January 6th insurrectionist. So
which
now
we kind of knew he was going to do.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So now I guess Trump is saying it's A-okay to do that. Don't worry. No problem. You can even assault a police officer and we'll forgive you for that.
Especially if
people died.
Yeah.
People died. Yeah.
And especially if you're assaulting police officers in Trump's name, that
right.
That's the most pro-police president.
Yeah. Well, it has been a couple of crazy days, and I actually have a story to tell concerning the inauguration and a member of my family that I'm going to save for after dark. And I have a couple of updates. One I informed you two about that left you shook, and I have another one I remembered after we met last week that I'm going to break to you as well that I think will leave you equally shooketh. So stay tuned to After Dark this week on our Patreon and Apple Podcasts. I'm working through it in therapy and am deeply disappointed. But also, you know what? I had a thought on Inauguration Day. I wish Trump won in 2020. We never would have had January 6th. He would be in our past as of today. He wouldn't have had 4 years to reset, take a break, get buddy-buddy with Elon, put together a whole new cabinet. It would have been better if he won in 2020.
I don't know. I mean, it's always easy to say hindsight's 2020. I don't know. I think some version of what's happening now was always part of the playbook. Remember, this isn't even just the Trump playbook. This is a multi-decade playbook and plan that has come out of the most extreme corners of our conservative party, which is basically just our entire Republican Party now. Not very many of the rational ones left. So it might not have looked exactly the same, but I think it would have been rough. And I think not having someone in there to kind of stem the bleeding for a few years would have also been rough. I'm not saying that I wouldn't want to have it over with now. I truly would, but I don't know that him getting a second term at all.
Of course, that would have been the best option. But if I had to pick between him becoming president again now or 4 years ago, I think 4 years ago would have been the better outcome for us.
That makes sense. It would have been like the cherry on a shitty year anyway, right? Because 2020 was kind of a shitty year. We were still in the COVID era.
Yeah.
Technically. So.
And also, what got me thinking about that was we have 4 more years to endure right now. I'm going to be about 39 when he leaves office, which was a tragic thought. I'm going to be ending my 30s by the time Trump leaves office. That's
the only thing that's honestly getting me through is reminding myself he can't run again after this.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, can't he?
No,
he can't, according to the current rules.
Right. Exactly.
Their whole strategy is around centralizing control with the executive, which kind of upends the whole point of checks and balances in our system. And that effectively makes the role of president, a king. It's very monarchical. And I think if they thought they could do it, I think they would absolutely try to either let him run for a third term or put in a loyalist to do it for him, give it to JD Vance. I
don't think a lot of people in Congress, Republicans in Congress, want Trump to run again. It's very convenient that he is leaving after this second term. And I also think this is one of those left-wing paranoias that you just can't think about because it's highly, highly unlikely for them to change things. It's a double-edged sword. I'm one of those people who actually doesn't believe democracy is ending now that Trump is in office. They both say it. Democracy's ending if Kamala wins. Democracy's ending if Trump wins. It's I know Trump is worse, but a third term or getting rid of the 2-term limit? No, I don't accept it. Call me naive.
I mean, my thing is I feel like it's actually been a much longer descent than just the last 10 years. there's, again, been a very conscientious effort since the Reagan years to deregulate and underfund education and lock people into crippling debt and consolidate wealth at the very, very top to be top of earners in this country. So I don't think it's just a Trump thing. I think he's just the instrument. He's a tool, honestly, a convenient tool.
Oh, he's a tool.
Yeah.
Loyalist Lord said, "Oh, sweet Andrew. All right. But over the last couple of days, it's only been 2 days, but the resistance from the left and the nuttiness is already everywhere. On Tuesday, while attending mass with Melania, JD Vance, and Usha Vance, Trump received this blunt request from the bishop who was delivering mass there. And her name was Marianne Edgar Bud, and she asked that Trump provide mercy for LGBTQ youth and immigrants. And she reminded Trump to his face, I encourage you all to go and watch the video, that immigrants do all kinds of laborious work in America that goes unrecognized and really hard work that many of us would never want to take on. And she only really politely asked for mercy for about a minute. But you could just see how Trump was fuming and JD Vance was side-eyeing him and the family was all there. It was great. And I have to say, that must have taken a lot of courage to say these things to his face. And he was not expecting it.
Yeah.
Well, she used she knew everybody was watching too. And so that's really commendable.
Yeah. So well done, Bishop.
Well, and he's already put her on blast. I don't know if you saw, he posted on Truth Social saying that she owes the entire country an apology.
Yeah, and she already responded. She already said, I'm not going to apologize for asking for mercy.
Only 51% of the country, right? What did he win by? 52?
Yeah, I mean, it was... I know he wants to claim to have a sweeping mandate, but it really isn't.
No.
Right.
No. And God didn't save him.
Mostly half are fine. We don't need the apology.
So it's nice to see moments like that. And again, we're already 2 days into his term and he's facing this type of thing. And on day one, he signed a bunch of executive orders, most of which actually seem to be legally flimsy. I want to quote Slate's senior courts and law writer. Lots of reporting suggested that this time around, Trump and his lawyers would avoid the sloppy legal work that plagued his first administration, so they'd fare better in the courts. I see no evidence of that in this round of executive orders. This is poor, slipshod work, obviously assisted by AI. Typos and formatting errors get repeated across CEOs, revealing extensive use of copy-paste. The rhetoric sounds like a ChatGPT imitation of the Fifth Circuit's laziest rulings. So it's more of the same. And this was something that we were worried about, that Trump would get it together more for the second term. And of course, it's day frickin' 3 of what, like 1,200 or something. But so far off to a bad start. And this is with a whole new cabinet. So just offering people a little glimmer of hope that nothing has changed with this guy. The circus continues.
I think what worries me is he does have a more competent lineup behind him now in terms of advisors and cabinet secretaries. And my fear is that he's just being used as a distraction, and that all of the outrage stories, like, of course, I think we all have seen various takes on, Elon Musk doing his Nazi salute over the last couple of days, probably until we're sick of hearing about it. But I think it's all by design. I think it's really intended to keep us sort of arguing amongst ourselves and trying to convince people who are not reachable and cannot be convinced that we all saw what we saw.
Yeah.
And instead, they want to deflect and recharacterize the conversation and make it about Roman salutes or some such shit. Like, I think this is the kind of thing that they're really counting on people to be distracted by and pour all of their energy into trying to prove or disprove. And the reality is, it does matter and we shouldn't normalize it and we should call it out. But at the same time, there are like actual policy directives in here that I think they don't want people paying as much attention to because they want you to be caught in the outrage cycle. Distract,
and more distraction. And April's pointing out too, she feels like it's already worse than last time. ICE is already in place and people are scared, for example. Yeah, the mass deportations, Trump's going to try to make them happen. We'll see if they will. States, including Nevada, by the way, are already fighting back, saying they're not going to participate in any mass deportations. But then Trump came out today and said, well, we're going to investigate people at the state level if they don't follow through with my request for mass deportation.
Cool, do it.
Yeah.
Do it. I just feel like anytime he makes these kinds of threats, I feel like instead of getting up in arms about it, just be like, okay.
Yeah.
Do it.
And something else we wanted to talk about today was Carrie Underwood, right, Pam? Because this kind of intersects with a lot of what we talk about here on the show.
Yeah, so there's a lot of buzz with regards to the inauguration, but specifically the sheer amount of star power Trump's administration was able to garner for the performances. And I think this was a shock to people because he was hard pressed to find many artists that would allow him to use their songs at his rallies over the course of the last, ever since he started running, basically. And if you take a look at his last inauguration, he was barely able to get anyone either. So this all kicked off when it was announced that Carrie Underwood was set to perform at the inauguration. Obviously a huge country star, American Idol winner. She's now a newly minted American Idol judge. So good publicity for her with that new season coming in as well. But she faced a lot of backlash when this was announced. And funnily enough, she had some malfunctions during her performance of America the Beautiful, and it was kind of awkward. And basically the audio cut out and she was fumbling for a few minutes and then ended up having to sing the rest of it a cappella. So
typical for a Trump event.
Yeah. Karma, I guess, depending on which way you lean. So there was also even a rumor that her streaming numbers were already down on Spotify, but multiple outlets have since sort of disproved this. At the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if she does lose some support because she's, I think that her music is pretty universally beloved. Everyone loves Before He Cheats, for example, but I'm sure we'll be saying that less and less. And I think part of the reason that people were especially upset was also because of her response to all this backlash. So in a statement she put out after people lost their shit over the announcement, she said, "I love our country and I'm honored to have been asked to sing at the inauguration and to be a small part of the historic event. I'm humbled to answer the call at a time when we must all come together in the spirit of unity and looking to the future." And I think that this really left a bad taste in people's mouths because it always kind of seems like conservatives and people that are part of the MAGA movement in general always want unity when they've got the upper hand, but they don't want to participate in unity. For example, I mean, we saw that with the insurrection, for example, you couldn't reason with people that were so brainwashed to come together for unity. So it's probably not, it was not, I would say the right phrase and usage to put out there.
I'm not too bothered by this that she performed, because it's a country music star. That should not be so surprising that she is probably conservative. But B, it would be different to me. I would be pissed at Carrie, who I enjoy too, if she had performed at one of his campaign events. But she is performing at the inauguration of a president who was fairly elected. She's not telling us to vote for him by performing at his inauguration. And that makes all the difference to me.
So it's interesting you mentioned that because another person who got a lot of backlash is Nelly. He's a rapper. We probably all remember Nelly. Hasn't had a hit in a while, but he was big when we were growing up.
Yeah.
And he also received a lot of criticism for answering the call, so to speak. And in a live stream defending his choice, he said, "The politics for me is over. He won. He's the president. He's the commander in chief. If President Biden would have asked me to perform, I would have performed. If Vice President Kamala Harris had won and asked me to perform, I would have performed." So basically, he was insinuating that performing an inauguration is not inherently political, which is what Carrie, this is basically what you were saying about Carrie here, that it's not an endorsement.
Yeah, I mean, if that's their choice. Like, this doesn't terribly bother me either, unless someone's being a hypocrite about it, which I know we're going to get to in a second, Pam.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I disagree. Personally, I think who you choose, like whose events you choose to perform at, is signaling a stamp of approval from you. But hey, if Carrie and Nelly don't feel that way, that's their prerogative.
Mm-hmm. So to that point, and obviously to Andrew's point, there were a lot of artists in this lineup that probably wouldn't surprise people. So Lee Greenwood, whose big hit "God Bless the USA" is, you know, its own form of propaganda, was tapped to perform and did perform. Kid Rock has obviously been on the campaign trail forever. With Trump, he was performing. The Village People as well performed. YMCA is one of the few songs that has been allowed to be used at Trump rallies. So there's no surprise there. Billy Ray Cyrus, Jason Aldean, we talked about him last year, I think, or the year before, because he had that one song, "Try That in a Small Town."
Yeah.
Rascal Flatts, also a big country act. Country is not inherently conservative, but there are an influx of conservative country stars. So I don't think anybody's really surprised. But to Laura's point about people being hypocritical, this is why Snoop Dogg also faced a lot of backlash when he agreed to perform.
Snoop?
Because he has been, Grandpa Snoop. People were really upset about this. He has been quoted expressing his distaste for Trump. He was also quoted back in 2020 talking about plans to turn out to vote for the first time because he didn't want Trump in the White House. He has spoken out a few times since, he served in office for the last 4 years. So that I think that is a completely different case, right? Like if you are inherently vocal about not liking somebody and what they stand for, I don't know if it's the best choice to come out and perform.
No, especially when I think it was 2016 after he was first elected. There's video of Snoop. He got on Insta or Snapchat or something and was saying that he was going to roast any rapper who got up there to perform at his inauguration. And he also shared some kind of racially charged commentary about how he would interpret someone who was doing that. And to see him now doing the thing that he was ready to light people up for is gross and ridiculous. And honestly, I've loved Snoop for a long time, and it really disappointed me.
Yeah, it disappointed me too. He's also been really outspoken. I mean, obviously he comes from Long Beach, and Long Beach, very diverse community. He's been outspoken too about immigration, deportation, and stuff like that. And so it does. In this case, it does leave like a bit more of a bitter taste in my mouth as well, Laura, to your point about him being so outspoken and then just kind of rolling over and maybe taking the payday. There seems to be some discrepancy over whether these artists get paid to perform or if they just do it for the honor. But
I wonder too. We know these tech CEOs have all been donating to the inauguration, but maybe that's just for other costly elements of Inauguration Day. I don't know. Anyway,
I think that's where we leave this story, but we would love to know what you guys think about this. Like, is agreeing to perform an inauguration inherently political?
Yeah.
Is that how you
Does
feel?
Does it differ from maybe a campaign event?
Is it case by case?
Mm-hmm.
Let us know.
Yeah. will you go see Carrie Underwood's Vegas residency, which returns in March for the final shows? I was just looking.
Will you?
No, actually, we were interested, but now I am annoyed about this. So I'm not going to go support her now. But I still do think there's a difference between appearing in a campaign event and appearing at the inauguration. It does have a different message to an extent.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Well, we will update everybody on the TikTok situation, but first we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back. All right, time for the latest on TikTok. This app has had a roller coaster of a week as well. So late last week, the Supreme Court unanimously upheld Biden's law that we had spoken about previously, which requires the app to be divested from the Chinese company ByteDance, or else it cannot be used in the US. And then on the eve of the law's start date, which I believe was Saturday, the app was pulled down, but then returned about 12 hours later. And before it was taken down and after it returned, TikTok thanked Trump for his efforts in messages that all US users saw when they opened up the app. And this was disgusting to me to see them sucking up to Trump like this. It actually kind of reminded me of when Trump signed all the COVID stimulus checks, in that it's basically a free ad for Trump, these TikTok messages were. And I also saw these messages on TikTok as a warning to all politicians. And that warning was, if you piss us off, we'll throw you under the bus in front of all of our users. If you are good to us, we will celebrate you in front of all 170 million of our US visitors. So it was sickening to see them suck up to Trump like this. And I just felt so embarrassed for the Biden administration. This was just they got self-owned. It was a self-own. It didn't have to be this way.
Well, also because they jumped on the bandwagon that Trump started with regards to wanting to shut down TikTok in America.
Right.
And you can bet the Trump administration is banking on, especially the young people that primarily do flock to TikTok these days to get their news and information, on the fact that he's the reason that the can of worms was even opened in the first place.
And now he's the one who looks good at the end of all of this. Trump saved TikTok. And to your point, Pam, all the youth are seeing this message. Trump saved us. You all can continue enjoying TikTok thanks to him. Saved it before he even got back into office.
Right, when he had no power.
Right.
It's TikTok being used as a propaganda tool because all of these Silicon Valley tech CEOs are in Trump's pocket now. So he can leverage private industry to propagandize stuff like this very easily now. That was just an early example of what it's going to look like.
Yeah. And we mentioned that Trump was signing a bunch of executive orders. One of them was that he is delaying the TikTok ban by 75 days. He also separately said that he wants America to own a 50% stake in the app when it is sold. So now that will literally be state-run media where Trump can influence the algorithm, where America, the government, can influence what we are seeing on there. And that's scary. So hopefully that part doesn't come true.
Yeah, but I was just going to say, I think we were talking about this too, that it's already looking like it's happening. There's been a lot of weird stuff happening over there.
Yeah, there's no
feel
live
like Laura's
option.
seen it too. Yeah.
There's no what?
There's no live option.
You can't go live anymore?
No.
Could that be because, and I saw this message on TikTok, they're still restoring it from the 12 hours. And that's another thing that blows my mind.
Then how come
they go through all this just to keep it closed?
International users have no issues?
Because it's the American servers that they had shut down, or the servers for America.
Okay.
Because Oracle is involved in this, like a data distribution company. I know you two had also mentioned when you go and search like Donald Trump rigged election, it showed no results. But yesterday I was thinking more about this. I went and searched Joe Biden rigged election and it didn't show anything either. I think they're just blanket muting all political related terms.
Right. But that's still dangerous. And it's kind of rich if Trump had a hand in that, because didn't he just sign that stupid executive order that basically was like, yeah, guess what, you guys, we still have the First Amendment.
Right. Temporary. Let's see if this actually stays in place. I wonder if they're muting keywords just around the inauguration. I agree there's some weird stuff happening, but I think we need to wait and see what actually happens long term here.
I'm not optimistic. Like, and here's the thing, like, look at what happened to Twitter when Elon took it over.
Mm-hmm.
That required no government intervention whatsoever.
And to that point, I've never gotten served more Twitter push alerts about Trump and Trump supporters than I have in these last few days. I would say the last like month or two leading up to the inauguration as well. And I keep telling Twitter that I don't want to see content like that. And it keeps serving it up.
So I take the points about Elon and Twitter. That definitely, I could see him putting his finger on the scales. But I just want everybody to proceed cautiously and don't jump to conclusions. And I'll give you an example of what's happening right now. And people are just way off on this. Lots of people are loading up Instagram this week and seeing that they're following Donald Trump and JD Vance on Instagram. And they said, we never followed them. This is because Mark and Donald are now buddy. No, it's because you were following POTUS and White House and VP on Instagram. Yes, and those accounts got changed over.
Yeah.
An alarming number of people are assuming that they're being forced into their feed. And they're not. Personally, I enjoy this every 4 years, the following and unfollowing of accounts. I remember gleefully refollowing VP and POTUS when Biden won. And just this past couple of days, I unfollowed them when I saw their stupid ass faces.
I had to explain this to my mom because she saw a news story that was framing it the first way you were saying it. It's just like, users reporting that they were forced to follow. It's like, I'm not saying that can't happen because that did happen to me on Twitter when Trump first won in 2016. I was all of a sudden following his personal account, which I had never followed before. And I thought that was weird. But in this case, yes, like if you're following VP, and I don't think people realize that the VP accounts get archived.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you can see that if you search VP, like they'll all come up.
No, it's a good point though. Like I think it can be really easy to get caught in the outrage cycle and then start seeing things to be outraged about everywhere. And I think you're right, Andrew. Like, we shouldn't be living like that. That's no way to live. At the same time, when I think about like the broader picture that's being painted here of all of the people that own all of these websites that are not just for social interaction, but they're also for distribution of news and free speech. Seeing all of these people paying $1 million to have a front row seat at the inauguration over elected officials, by the way, who typically would occupy those seats. Then looking at the deregulation that we can expect, especially around AI. Didn't he sign an EO around that as well? It does concern me that Trump will use that influence unofficially to, as you said, Andrew, put his thumb on the scale of what his new tech CEO buddies are going to do.
I'm with you there. It is scary how they all are kissing the ring. I mean, Meta announced the slew of changes. We touched on them, but they are way worse than we even got into on the show a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, it's disturbing, and I'm disappointed. And if you feel like you can leave social media, you probably should, or at least go to Blue Sky. Things are still good over there, and they're not buddy with Donald or owned by some media conglomerate. Last thing I'll say on TikTok is that, well, two things I'll say on TikTok. I predict that the app will get banned again. It's going to disappear again because it's not going to get sold to a company in the US. TikTok is currently unavailable in the Apple and Android stores if you do not already have it. So don't delete it. because you won't be able to get it back unless, and my friend did this, you get a VPN, you put yourself in Canada, you download the app, and then you turn off the VPN. So it'd be a bit of a hassle. But right now, these companies, Apple and Android, they don't want to touch this issue because they could be fined $5,000 per user if they don't follow the law as it's currently written. So that's why it's not in the Apple and Android stores. All right, we're going to take one more break today, and then Laura's going to touch on an update with the Supreme Court and porn. And then, believe it or not, we're going to have a lighthearted discussion. So we'll be right back.
All right, y'all. Well, as if the impending enshittification of TikTok as a source of news and entertainment isn't bad enough, it seems like the Supreme Court may be poised to ruin your spicy time, which I feel like we're all going to need over the next few years. We all need distractions. But last week, the Supreme Court heard the first major First Amendment case involving pornography or sexual speech of any kind in more than 2 decades. This is also the first such First Amendment case for the court to hear since Republicans gained a 6-3 supermajority on the Supreme Court. And God knows they're going to get an even bigger majority now that Velveeta Voldemort is back in. That's my new favorite name for him. I saw it on
nice.
TikTok. They'll probably ban it soon. But it's a case that essentially potentially allows the justices to both limit adults' access to pornography and walk back longstanding free speech protections for sexual content. I don't know if either of y'all have been following any of the states that have put age gating bans in place. Florida is one of those states. So, for example, if you are in Florida and you try to go to Pornhub, you're going to get a pop-up, like a blocker, basically saying, hey, this is age restricted. You need to provide identification to prove that you're actually old enough to access this information. Florida's certainly not the only state.
Yeah, I remember when this happened, and it seems kind of crazy that you have to provide identification to access a porn site. Like, I don't know if I would trust Pornhub with my identification. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's what I worry about. You might not necessarily be handing it over to Pornhub. They might be working with a third-party service, but who's to say when you submit your, let's say, your state ID, that data isn't going to get leaked at some point.
Yeah.
And they might potentially be able
exactly.
to tie your ID to the content that you were watching. So you might
That's
be
the other thing,
outed as
too.
somebody who's gay or bi, lesbian, whatever else. I would not trust any of those age verification systems.
No. And actually, Camille in our Discord is calling out, I'm in Tennessee, and I did try to open a spicy website last week and got a notice that it's blocked in my state because they can't deal with the new Tennessee law that says they need to protect minors from their site. So again, age verification. That's what a lot of states are doing.
But Camille says now, and this kind of ties into what you're going to get into in a couple of minutes. She says that luckily for her, a VPN worked just fine. So she transferred herself to a different state or part of the world, and then there was no issue. And I'm sure a lot of kids are going to be doing that, and adults in these states where they're adding age verification.
Right. So the case that's before the Supreme Court actually involves a Texas law that is wanting to do the same thing, require, websites that are publishing a significant amount of, quote, sexual material harmful to minors to verify the age of people viewing that content. And what's really interesting about this is that this law out of Texas that's being heard before the court is really similar to a federal age gating requirement that the Supreme Court actually struck down in 2004 in Ashcroft v. ACLU. So essentially, this ruling concluded that the Child Online Protection Act, aka COPA, which was the focus of this particular court case was unconstitutional and a violation of First Amendment freedom of speech rights. COPA, very similarly, was requiring all distributors of that material to require age verification, but it was also very broad in its interpretation of what needed that age verification. So they categorized it or described it more as material that by contemporary community standards was judged to basically be obscene, or anything that showed sex acts or nudity, including female breasts. So say goodbye to taking your kid to an art museum, I guess. Like, never going to look at Renaissance art anymore if you can't see female breasts. And God forbid if you take them to a Georgia O'Keeffe exhibit, because all those flowers are basically just vaginas. But Ashcroft did rule that age gating law didn't survive ultimately the test of applicability and, general relevance across the country, because it wasn't ultimately going to be realistic. Being able to require all websites that sort of fell into this very broad category that they described of requiring them to age gate that content. But all of that said, today's Supreme Court is pretty different than the one that we had in the 90s that ultimately struck this down. So we're looking at a court that seems like it's much more poised to go ahead and put something like this in effect. This even includes one of the liberal justices, Elena Kagan. It looks like she may be poised to side with conservatives on this vote. And I thought it could be interesting to pause here and kind of talk about how accessing the internet and accessing, how should we call it, adult material looked a little different in the 90s than it does today.
Well, I remember porn not being as freely accessible as it was. And I'm not talking about parental controls, but you had to pay for porn back in my day. There wasn't Pornhub and Xtube and all this. I mean, I still have a very specific memory of, let's say, borrowing my parents' credit card to access a porn site. And look, this was so long ago, I can't remember the specifics, but I feel like I just needed to input the card number just to gain access. Not necessarily, it wasn't going to charge me, but I was little Andrew at the time. What did I know about terms and conditions and free trials that I was probably signing up for? But yeah, it's gotten a lot easier to access so much porn online. So yeah, it's changed quite a bit. And yet they think now they can enforce this when porn has just spread all over the internet.
Well, you could find porn to your point, on Twitter or X. You used to be able to find it on Tumblr, but they got rid of it. Yeah.
Yep. The Millennial Patreon.
Sign up today.
Is there porn on Reddit? I legit didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't worry.
Right.
I'll send you some of my favorite subs.
All right.
Well, to that point, you would have to classify, like, it's just like, what do they classify as porn? I feel like that could be really broad. Like, I was reading this article a few years ago about how audio erotica was having a huge moment on Reddit, and that there's like so many subreddits where people make a living just doing that. And it's kind of come back around with the rise of, erotica in literary fiction too, with audiobooks that are extremely graphic. So it's like, is porn also something that you can listen to? Will that be age gated?
Right, exactly. And that's really what's at issue here. And I know there are online communities that are already very concerned about how this is kind of a slippery slope. And ultimately what it boils down to is what Sam Alito defines as obscene material is going to look very different than what Sonia Sotomayor defines as obscene material. So we're kind of left to the whims of people who are quite frankly out of touch with the way the internet works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy because that is basically what what is protected under free speech and freedom of expression comes down to. But you're right. Like in the past, like pornography, with the exception to child pornography, is considered freedom of expression. But it's because the universal public considers child pornography to be obscene. So it was not just, the people that are sitting as justices that are deciding. It's like the greater public of the United States. And I don't know if the greater public of the United States would necessarily agree, to your point, with Alito's version or Barrett's version.
Right. Exactly.
So on and so forth.
And, I have to say, I know that I'm probably not going to be in agreement with the conservative justices about how they want to define obscene material that needs to be age gated. I do think that they had some valid points that came out of oral arguments last week. Many of today's justices think that Ashcroft decision is obsolete because of how different things are today. So even Amy Coney Barrett brought up that Ashcroft was decided before the invention of the iPhone and before the proliferation of any number of internet connected devices that children could easily use to access pornography. At one point, she even spoke about the trouble that she has personally experienced as a parent trying to block certain content on her kids' devices. And even though Samuel Alito is draconian in all senses of the word, he did have a good point when he brought up that the internet or the government trying to do things like promote filters and blockers isn't really going to be effective because kids are often so much more tech savvy than their parents. So, again, it's that same analogy of build a 10-foot wall and I'll show you an 11-foot ladder. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kids are just going to be able to get around that stuff.
Instead of all the focus on age, proving your age, I would rather see them work on better content blockers, require pornographic websites to install some little code that ties into some content blocking software that's built into iOS and Android. I just think there's better ways to do this. And it's also what I mentioned at the top of this, a privacy nightmare potentially if you're submitting your ID to this company, and that data will inevitably leak. So,
it always does.
Yeah. And then here's a sentence I didn't think I'd say. I agree with Amy Coney Barrett too. It's tough. Like you said, Laura, with that analogy, the ladder analogy, it's kids will always find a way. There's been a lot of talk over recent years too. Apple, Android, they have these screen time limits. They have these parental controls, but kids figure out a way around them. Or another one that always cracks me up is with Wi-Fi routers. You could block your kids at night from using the Wi-Fi. Okay, then they go and turn the Wi-Fi off and use their cell data to continue watching YouTube.
Yeah, exactly.
There's always an easy loophole.
It's so silly. Yeah.
Yeah. Or they piggyback on the neighbor's Wi-Fi. It's just,
right.
Yeah. And that's why it feels like kind of an impossible question in ways. 'Cause on the one hand, we all obviously agree that as a society, we have a vested interest in making sure that we're protecting children online to the extent possible. And I think the government does need to be involved in regulating that. But it's such a big question. And I feel like no one group of 9 people is going to possibly be able to make a single decision that will perfectly apply to all of the various, First Amendment rights concerns that come out of this.
And it also shouldn't come at the expense of people that are considered adults, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and honestly, I would say even teenagers, because I think it's probably safer for teens to be reading smut online or maybe even watching porn, even though that's like it's kind of like unrealistic, you know, but at least that's like a safe place to explore rather than like going
real,
out,
maybe
real
unprotected sex.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, so I don't know. It's tough. Like, how do you regulate that?
I think it does come down to the parents. And
I agree.
I know parents have a lot going on and they can't always keep an eye on their kids' phones and their laptops. But that's ultimately going to be the best solution. You as a parent just have to be on top of it. I think another big difference between today and when we were growing up and got our first computers is that our computer was typically the family computer in a family space. Unless you were the only one home, you wouldn't be able to go on porn and get away with it. You would be caught. So it's just so easy for kids to privately check out the internet these days.
It's so funny because like you mentioned that because I was babysitting my niece. My niece is 4 and she obviously like knows how to use the iPad, and the iPad is not really for her. She just like goes up to my stepmom's room and takes it whenever she wants. She knows the password. It's the same. There's a lot of that's like a false sense of security. So for example, when I was babysitting her, she wanted to watch the Garfield movie on Netflix. And I said, okay. And she goes, I know how to do it. And I said, okay, here's the remote. And she has her own kid's profile that she goes down to, and she knows that that's for her. But the funny thing is that none of the adult profiles have password protection on them.
Right.
So she could go onto anyone else's profile technically. And the idea is that you set up the kid's profile so it's safe for the kids, but it's not safe for the kids if you're not setting up password protection on all the other adult icons, you know, like profiles. Yeah. So it's just, there's stuff like that definitely could, you know, we could work on for sure.
For sure. And I think a lot of it does come down to parent responsibility.
Right.
At the same time, I don't know if I think that government has no role here whatsoever. Like I think I'm seeing a couple of comments from people who disagree with me in the Discord, and I totally get that. I think it's a hard question to answer, honestly, because it's a really hard line to draw. It's almost like if you're going to do it, you have to know that it's going to be legislation that needs to be continuously updated because of how quickly the internet and social trends change around sexually explicit materials. Like, for example, the fact that, you know, Pam and I can come on this show and wear sleeveless shirts if we want to, 100 years ago would have been considered obscene. Like, how we view these materials evolves over time. And I think it gets really complicated when you try to cement something like that into law. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like the best solution is something that a lot of more adult websites already have in place, which is confirming that you're over the age of 18. And yeah, the kids are going to lie about that stuff. I definitely did when I was under 18.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know that I think it's reasonable to put the onus on these independent businesses to be verifying people's fucking IDs. And then, Andrew, you mentioned this a couple of times already, but it is a major security concern, privacy.
And Riley is bringing up another point here in the Discord. They wrote, my parents never had any conversation of any kind with me as a kid, nothing, or on relationships, sex, politics, nothing. I think that is another great place to start, Laura, to your point about having checkpoints for kids. Before they access mature content, you should be having a conversation with your children so that they know that they're not really supposed to be in those places. And you should probably take it a step further and just be like, if you find yourself there, like I'm an adult that cares about you, and I want you to come and talk to me about what you saw.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of shaming children for being curious, which it happens to everybody gets curious. I'm sure we all got curious. Andrew's talking about his credit card thing with his parents. I was definitely reading smutty fan fiction in my teenage years.
Yeah.
You know, probably
What's
like a
a
little bit
naked
younger
man
than that.
look like?
You know,
oh, my
there's you should,
stars.
but you should have an open dialogue with your children if this is something that really bothers you, and it shouldn't be up to society to parent your children and to control what your children see. It should really be up to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it becomes that slippery slope argument because, like, right now, it seems like the court is really only talking about, traditional video pornography. But as we know, we did a whole episode about smut on our other show, What the Hype? And we know that spicy material comes in literally all media forms. And that slippery slope can then begin to involve things like books, for example. If we're going to define obscene material as something that depicts a woman's breasts, like, as I said, goodbye, like tons of Renaissance era art books. Or what about the My Body book that I think Pam,
the American Girl one.
Yeah. Like, these are resources that were designed to help young girls and women understand what was happening to their bodies as they went through puberty. And like, that's not obscene.
Right.
And it's not pornographic. And if it's something that you don't want your child to see, that's your prerogative. Sorry, they're going to get curious and go find it somewhere else. But like, it gets kind of unsettling, especially when we consider the fact that the court is poised to really limit First Amendment rights here, create some serious privacy concerns for Americans across the country, and ultimately allow a law like the one that exists in Texas or Florida to become the norm nationwide when many of our states aren't asking for this.
Like Brock said in our Discord right now, he's listening live on Patreon. They are literally making it harder to get porn than to get a gun. That's America for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The QAnon shaman, after he got released, was like, I'm going to buy a motherfucking gun. And the Supreme Court's over here like, oh, but what if kids accidentally get on a spicy website? Like,
and all these southern states trying to get into your business when they're the states who usually hate big government and government overreach.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Well, to wrap things up on a lighter note, we saw this headline over at BuzzFeed who poached it from Reddit, and we thought it would be fun to discuss. The idea of this was that somebody on Reddit asked, what were we as millennials told as kids that turned out not to be true? And we just thought this would be a fun little topic to discuss, because I'm sure we all feel a little betrayed when we find out about, things that we were repeatedly told as children that turned out to be false.
Mm-hmm.
So, Laura, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, for
sure. What were some things you were told?
Oh my gosh. Well, and I don't even think it was just me. I think it was as a generation, we were like all collectively subjected to this bullshit. First and foremost, I would say the stress about your grade point average deciding the rest of your life. And for anyone who may still be at a point in their life, like college, grad school, whatever, and freaking out about your GPA, I have some great news for you. As soon as you graduate, as long as you have a degree, no one gives a shit what your GPA was. So I'm not saying don't work hard, and I'm not saying don't get good grades, but I am saying don't stress yourself to death about it.
I also wanted to add to this, like, the myth of the permanent record in general. Like, if you get too many detentions, it'll go to your permanent. Nobody cares. College might care a little bit, college admissions, but you'll be able to, I don't know, someone will take you. It'll be fine.
What about this first one in the list?
Like, I just remember how emphasized the food pyramid was in the 90s in every doctor's office, every classroom.
Shoved into our eyeballs all the time. I'm looking at the food pyramid graphic that I think we'd all recognize on Google right now. That is burned into my brain.
Yeah, 4 to 6 servings of fruits and veggies.
Yeah, bread, cereal, rice, and pasta. 6 to 11 servings, baby. Mamma
Which
mia,
is
enjoy all that pasta.
not what's recommended today.
No.
It's
And
like,
they did end up like reorganizing it, right?
yes, they had to because it was bullshit, because a lot of it was basically ordered in the way that it was based on those industries lobbying our government to do it that way and tell us that we needed all of this stuff that we didn't necessarily need in as high volumes. And with that, I would include the Got Milk campaign. Do y'all remember that?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
With the milk mustaches.
Yeah.
You don't think milk's important, Laura? Calcium?
Yeah, no. So I know you're going to try and drive a wedge between me and Pat over this issue. And the thing is, no, I mean, I do think milk is important. I don't think that we needed to be drinking as much of it as those advertisements were suggesting that we did.
Fair. That was an iconic campaign, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was also the dairy lobby.
Like a little lactose intolerant.
Right.
Like me. So one of my big ones is that you'll stop getting acne breaking out when you reach adulthood, which is the biggest lie anyone ever told ever.
I was really dependent on that promise. I had such bad acne in middle school. I was like, oh, don't worry. One day it's all going to be gone. I'm going to look back on it all and laugh.
And we're over here single-handedly supporting the mighty patch industry.
Yeah, I have one of those hero patches in between my eyes right now. In fact, it's an invisible one, so you can't see it on camera. By the way, those came to Costco the other day. I texted Pam.
Yeah, you sent a picture. Yeah, I'm going to have to look for them at my Costco. They might not have them. So another one of mine, too, is cracking your knuckles is bad for you, causes arthritis. This used to stress me out as a kid. Like, I heard this so much, it would stress me out because I had, my grandpa used to crack my knuckles.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would like freak out thinking that like, that was the reason, like I have big chubby fingers. Yeah. I was getting arthritis. Yeah.
Yeah. This also reminds me, I don't know if y'all ever got told this growing up by teachers, usually was when I would get it. If you swallow gum, it's going to take 7 years. Mm-hmm. It's going to be in your stomach for 7 years. The amount of full ass adults who told me that completely straight faced.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I wonder if they actually believed it at the time.
Honestly,
I know.
I believed that into my later years. I didn't really have any reason to think otherwise. And in fact, just a few months ago, I was out and chewing gum and I was with a friend. I accidentally just like took in a big gasp of air while chewing gum and I swallowed it. It went straight down my throat. And I was like, well, I instinctively thought, well, that's going to be in my stomach for years now. F my life. And I don't know. I don't know if it is. I haven't seen it in my stool, which might be a concern, actually.
I mean, do you frequently do stool inspections?
You don't? Laura, this is life in your 30s. You got to start doing that. And in a few more years, we're going to be pooping into a box and sending it off to be examined.
I just feel like that's maybe something you do. Like if something looks or feels weird, or maybe better yet, you should go to a GI.
So mine that I was taught as a kid are more personal stories. First of all, I had some older cousins and two separate ones. One guy and one girl really liked to screw with me. One summer, my cousin Joe, he convinced me during our annual summer beach trip that when you turn 8 years old, you have to have your eyeballs replaced. Oh. It's just a part of life. It's time to get new eyeballs when you turn 8 years old. And my cousin convinced me of this. I was sold. I was terrified. I didn't want to ask my parents about it because I didn't want to hear more information. I believed them. And for that week at the beach, I fell for it. And then by the end of the week, either he came clean or I finally did ask my parents. But I was scared. And that's probably one reason I'm scared of just like doctors, because that instilled a fear of surgery for me.
Yeah, no, that would be terrifying to hear as a kid.
Yeah. And then another one, you two remember Carmen Sandiego? Were you into her and her show and books and all that? Well, with another cousin, Stephanie, me and my sister loved watching Carmen Sandiego, and they had some sort of like detective game you can buy and you can play out cases. And I just remember my cousin had convinced us that Carmen Sandiego was real. And she was actually in communication with Carmen herself. And she was getting these missions from Carmen for us. And this went on for probably like a summer or a few months or something. We would see her a lot. And we'd always play Carmen Sandiego together. And one day I found out that Carmen Sandiego wasn't real. It was like hearing Santa Claus wasn't real. I still remember being depressed at this news.
Aww.
And that my cousin had lied to us about Carmen Sandiego. God. Yeah.
How much older was she? Or is she?
She's like 6 or 7 years older, I think.
Okay. See, that's actually kind of sweet. It seems like she was trying to create a magical experience for her younger cousins.
Yeah. It was cool because it did feel like we were actually doing an investigation for Carmen. But yeah, that was a disappointing one. It's you know, the older siblings, the older cousins, they always find a way to screw with you.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have a younger brother and I definitely trolled him a lot like this.
Anything you can think of in particular?
Yeah. So I told him when and this is so mean, there's 5 years between us, he was going through potty training. And he was kind of annoying me because he just kept asking me questions about the toilet and the bathroom. And I was trying to watch like Rugrats or something. I was like, leave me alone, kid. And so I told him that there was a monster that lived in the toilet that would bite his butt off if he sat on it for too long.
Oh.
Yeah. And so a couple days later, he's at preschool, terrified to go to the bathroom because I told him there was a monster in the toilet. And yeah, no, did I feel like a huge asshole? Absolutely. I think he's all right though. I think he
turned out okay.
He
using
turned
the
out
toilet
okay.
normally now. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know his habits like that, but I assume so.
Yeah. Another
you should ask him if he still checks the toilet bowl.
Oh man, I'll text him that right now. Actually, like, hey, remember that time that I bullied you and made you think that you were going to die? Going to the bathroom?
I only asked because my brother was convinced when we were little that all of the figurines and like the art with people in it in my grandparents' bathroom were watching him when he was going to the bathroom. And so my grandma always knew when he was the last one to go because she would go into the bathroom and they would all be turned around. So he would spend all this time turning everything around before he went to the bathroom. And he's still like, yeah, I'll still turn them around when I go in. So I think that's really funny.
Yeah, I think I may have told the story on Millennial at some point, but I went through a phase where I would turn around all the pictures in my childhood bedroom because I was afraid the pictures were watching me, whether it was sleeping, changing clothes, all that. I got really paranoid and I grew out of it somehow, but that wasn't fun having to do that. That was a chore.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think that's that odd of a thing to do because I've definitely heard of multiple people who feel that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It was kind of, type of paranoia was kind of ahead of its time because now it's easier than ever to secretly film somebody with smartphones.
Right.
That's true.
And so many people put covers over the built-in cameras. Yeah, the built-in cameras on their computers.
Do you two do that?
No.
I don't either.
No.
I trust the light. If the light's on, that means the camera's on. That's good enough for me. All right. Well, coming up in After Dark this week, I teased it at the top of the show. Now that we're in another Trump term, we thought we'd look at how this is going to affect our relationships with our friends and family who might not see eye to eye with us politically. So we have some recent stories to share there. I've got 3 separate items to gossip about.
After Dark is part of Mega Millennial, which you get every week when you're a patron or Apple Podcast subscriber. It's also ad-free. Visit patreon.com/millennial to pledge today, or Apple Podcast users can tap into the show and subscribe to the Mega Millennial feed.
Other Patreon benefits include recording studio access, Smart Mouths archives releases, our community Zoom hangouts, and access to our planning meetings. It's easy to get started. Apple Podcasts and Patreon offer 7-day free trials and annual subscription discounts.
Time for some recommendations for the pals. What do you have, Pam?
I wanted to recommend First Aid Beauty's Ultra Repair Cream. I always have this on stock in the winter because my skin tends to get drier, especially when the weather gets colder. And it's just a really nice, super thick cream. And it always helps get rid of the dry spots. I'll put this like anywhere that I'm dry to, not just my face, even though it's technically formulated for your face. So if you're struggling with any kind of like dry skin, but especially on your face, I would recommend picking up a little tub of this. They sell it at Ulta. They sell it at Sephora. I've seen it at TJ Maxx on sale too. So if you get lucky, you can get it for a little discount over there. But yeah, it's great. It's unscented and really good for sensitive skin. I also have sensitive skin, so just wanted to put that on your radar.
I want to recommend a account on Threads that I found the other day, Trumpflation Tracker. Let's see how the price of eggs goes over the next couple of years. But this account is also tracking the state of the economy in the Trump era. So it's going to be very interesting to follow. And this might be a source of a lot of I told you so's for family and when we're sharing information on the show.
I really hope that when they post these updates, they're including the current price of eggs in every post. So like, we know this is important. We know this is why y'all voted the way you did. So major update, price of eggs is here. You can't afford lumber or the chips to make like your electronics, but eggs. We got it on lock.
Which I can't even find at most grocery stores right now. To that point.
I know.
So.
We're out of eggs in Vegas. The bird flu is killing all the hens.
Mm-hmm.
It's nuts.
It's Trump's America. And I want to recommend Severance Season 2. So the first episode of the new season dropped last week, and it really hits the ground running. It's so good. I'm really, really excited. The show is back on Apple TV. Apple TV Plus, excuse me. It's just so good, and it was a refreshing, original idea. I feel like we don't get to see a ton of these in TV nowadays. So I really loved it. I'm so excited for the second season.
Me too. And finally, right? I think we had to wait 3 years. Woof.
It's been a long wait.
All right, pals, couple of reminders before we wrap up. We now have a merch store. It's at shop.millennialshow.com. I'm wearing the For the Show hoodie today. It's embroidered. It says Millennial underneath. It's really freaking comfortable. So hit up shop.millennialshow.com to grab official Millennial swag. It's a great new way to support the show.
And don't forget to follow the show in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode, and leave us a review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Also, don't forget, we are now releasing video episodes on YouTube.
To stay in touch with us, you can email millennialshow@gmail.com or visit millennialshow.com. While you're there, you'll also find links to all of our various social media channels, so please do give us a follow on those. And Spotify users can also leave feedback directly within an episode.
After Dark kicks off in a moment for patrons and Apple Podcast subscribers. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'm Andrew.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Pamela.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.